In a world lit by footlights and illusion, one dancer gave everything to a single performance and never returned. Her name was Moira Shearer, the flame-haired ballerina who made The Red Shoes not just a film, but a legend. She twirled across the screen with such ferocity, audiences forgot where fiction ended and truth began. Every movement, every breath, felt like surrender to beauty, to pain, to destiny itself. But when the world expected her to dance again, she vanished. She left behind fame, applause, and an industry ready to worship her. Why would a woman who had the world at her feet walk away from it all? Some said she feared being trapped by her own perfection. Others believed the role had claimed her soul. Whatever the truth, Moira Shearer's story remains one of the most haunting in film history, the tale of the dancer who gave everything to her art and lost herself within it. Moira Shearer was born in Dunfermline, Scotland, in 1926, a girl whose quiet grace hid an unshakable will. From the moment she first stepped onto a wooden studio floor, ballet became her world, her language, her destiny. By her early 20s, she had already earned acclaim across Britain, known for the way she seemed to float rather than dance ethereal, yet painfully human. Then came The Red Shoes, 1948. Director Michael Powell saw in her something beyond talent, a kind of fragility that could break beautifully on screen. She was hesitant. She wasn't an actress, she insisted, but a dancer. Yet Powell convinced her that art, in any form, was simply another stage. When the cameras rolled, Moira became Victoria Page, a woman torn between love and the art that consumed her. The performance was transcendent. Critics called her the soul of motion. The film became one of cinema's greatest achievements, an explosion of color and emotion that redefined what film could be. Overnight, Moira Shearer was more than a dancer, she was an icon. But for her, the fame felt hollow. Behind the applause was a growing unease. The world saw brilliance. She saw a reflection she no longer recognized. Before the legend of The Red Shoes, there was a young girl in Scotland chasing rhythm through the rain. Moira Shearer's beginnings were humble, no grand stages, no glittering spotlight. Just a small girl in a cold room, her mother watching proudly as she turned, leapt, and dreamed of something greater. Her movement spoke where words could not. She was born to dance, and the world would soon know it. At 14, Moira entered London's Sadler's Wells Ballet School, the beating heart of British ballet. There, she found her place among disciplined artists who treated movement as prayer. The world was emerging from the darkness of war, and in that weary landscape, Moira's artistry felt like a rebirth. Her red hair, her precision, her quiet fire, they made her unforgettable. Critics called her a spirit of light in a time of shadows. Her rise was meteoric. By her early 20s, she had become the darling of the British stage. That was when fate intervened, when filmmaker Michael Powell attended one of her performances and was captivated. He didn't just see a dancer. He saw a story, a tragedy, a muse. He offered her the lead in The Red Shoes, a film about a ballerina whose passion leads her to ruin. Moira resisted. "I'm not an actress," she told him. But Powell was relentless and right. When the cameras rolled, she transcended the screen. Her dance wasn't choreography, it was confession. The world fell in love with her, and in that love, her curse was sealed. The triumph of The Red Shoes made Moira Shearer a global sensation. Her image filled magazines. Her name lit marquees from London to New York. But what the world saw as a miracle, she experienced as a slow suffocation. The role that made her famous had trapped her inside its beauty. She was no longer Moira, only Victoria Page, the doomed dancer she had portrayed. Hollywood came calling almost immediately. Directors wanted her in lavish productions. Critics hailed her as the future of cinematic grace. But she refused them all. "They don't want me," she said quietly. "They want the ghost of a girl who never existed." Behind her calm, there was a growing sense of disillusionment. Acting felt false, a game of surfaces. Ballet had always been truth, pain, sweat, breath, the body's dialogue with music. But film reduced that truth into something ornamental. The press called her difficult, arrogant even. Yet her refusal wasn't rebellion, it was preservation. She was fighting to protect the artist within her from being consumed by the myth. Those close to her began to notice a certain melancholy. She smiled for photographers, but the spark that once drove her seemed dimmer, quieter. Fame had come too suddenly, too intensely, and it had stolen the very intimacy she cherished with her art. She once confided that she felt like a doll wound up to dance for an audience that never sleeps. And so, while others chased immortality, Moira began to retreat. She danced less, spoke less, disappeared more. The light that had once illuminated her so fiercely began to turn cold. By the mid-1950 seconds, Moira Shearer's name had drifted into silence. To the public, it was as if she had simply stopped existing. To those who knew her, it was a conscious, vanishing, the deliberate retreat of a woman who had tasted fame and found it poisonous. She still danced occasionally, but the lightness that once defined her was replaced by something deeper, sadder. Each movement seemed to carry the weight of memory. She began performing only in select productions, always choosing art over applause. Yet even there, the ghost of the red shoes followed. No matter what she did, no matter where she went, the world refused to see her as anything but Victoria Page, the dancer who couldn't stop dancing. The film's haunting story had fused with her own life, and she could never escape it. When she returned to cinema in Peeping Tom, 1960, audiences didn't recognize her evolution. They only saw what they remembered, the red-haired ballerina, the tragic muse. The film, misunderstood in its time, was dismissed, and with it, Moira's chance to redefine herself vanished once more. Privately, she turned her energy to teaching and writing, finding solace in the quiet discipline that had always grounded her. She spoke little of her past, as if afraid to awaken it. A colleague later recalled, "She carried herself like someone who had outlived her own legend." Moira didn't fall from grace, she stepped away from it. But in doing so, she entered a different kind of shadow, one not of scandal or tragedy, but of erasure. The woman who had given her soul to art now lived unseen, her masterpiece replaying endlessly without her. The world remembered her as eternal. She, however, had already said goodbye. In the years that followed, Moira Shearer faded from the public gaze with the same grace that once defined her every step. She had traded grand theaters for quiet rooms, applause for conversation, and fame for peace. With her husband, writer and broadcaster Ludovic Kennedy, she built a life far removed from the noise that had once surrounded her. Together, they lived in Oxford, a world of books, laughter, and silence where the stage lights no longer reached but the warmth of truth still lingered. From time to time, she appeared in documentaries or retrospectives, speaking about the red shoes with a mix of fondness and distance. She never disowned the film, but she no longer let it define her. "It was a beautiful illusion," she once said, "but it wasn't my whole life." Her words carried neither bitterness nor regret, only acceptance. As age softened her features, she seemed to grow even more luminous, as though the intensity of her youth had settled into serenity. When The Red Shoes was restored decades later, critics praised it as one of cinema's eternal treasures. Her image once again danced across the screen, untouched by time, the same fire, the same fragile perfection. When she passed away in 2006, the headlines echoed the familiar phrase, "Star of the Red Shoes dies at 80. Even in death, she was tethered to that role, proof of how deeply art and artist can become one. But those who truly knew her remembered something else. Not the dancer who burned for beauty, but the woman who dared to stop dancing. In that quiet act of defiance, Moira Shearer found her final grace, the peace that fame could never offer. Today, the name Moira Shearer still shimmers wherever the Red Shoes is mentioned. She remains forever young, forever mid-spin, forever caught between ecstasy and sorrow. The film is now studied not just as a masterpiece of color and movement, but as a meditation on obsession and Moira's performance, its beating heart. Viewers still speak of her as if she were more than human, the woman who didn't merely act or dance, but dissolved into the very rhythm of the film. Yet her legacy stretches beyond that singular role. She represents the courage to walk away, to claim ownership over one's art and one's life. In an era that demanded women surrender themselves to the industry, she refused. That refusal became its own kind of statement, one whispered across decades. You can be brilliant and still choose peace. Her students and admirers recall her discipline, her humility, her unwavering honesty. She never sought monuments or tributes. Her artistry spoke for itself. And as long as the Red Shoes continue to dance across the screen, so will the spirit of the woman who wore them. Moira Shearer did not vanish, she transcended. She proved that sometimes the truest art lies not in performance, but in knowing when to stop. Moira Shearer's life is a quiet rebellion against the myth of eternal fame. She reached the pinnacle of artistic perfection and then chose to leave it behind. In a world obsessed with applause, her silence became a statement louder than any ovation. She didn't fall. She stepped away with purpose. proving that greatness doesn't always end in spectacle. Her story is a mirror held up to the soul of every artist, the struggle between creation and destruction, between surrender and survival. The red shoes made her immortal, but it was her decision to stop dancing that made her human. When the lights fade and the stage empties, what remains isn't the noise, but the echo, the soft reminder that behind every legend stands a person who once longed simply to breathe. Moira Shearer's legacy isn't just about a dance that destroyed her, it's about the strength to walk away before it did. What would you have done to stand at the peak of perfection, only to turn your back on it? Do you think Moira Shearer was running from fame, or finally finding herself beyond it? Share your thoughts below. Every perspective adds another layer to her haunting story. And if her courage moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more stories of brilliance and shadow with us. Fame and shadows. Every star has its story.